Hello, everybody. Welcome to our session this afternoon. My name is Alex Tom with the UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency based here in Canada. Thank you so much for joining us today for this UNHCR on Mission Rohingya, and we are so grateful that you are spending a part of your day with us. So before we proceed, we wanted to take a moment to acknowledge our colleagues at UNHCR Afghanistan. I'm sure all of you have been watching and reading about these developments in Afghanistan, and we want to assure you that UNHCR remains on the ground helping with this crisis. You could learn more by visiting our website at unhcr.ca. This year, we plan on hosting several UNHCR on missions just like this, and we'll keep you updated and posted on which situation we focus on next. So, thank you again for your support. Now we're going to our event this afternoon. So this year marks 4 years since the mass exodus of Rohingya refugees from Myanmar. Now, more than 880,000 Rohingya refugees live in Bangladesh. And for today's On Mission, you will be joining us on a virtual visit to Bangladesh where you'll learn more about the Rohingya crisis. You will hear from Rohingya refugees, and you'll meet our colleagues on the ground in Bangladesh who will provide background about the ongoing crisis. After the virtual event or the visit, you'll have a chance to learn more about the Rohingya crisis through a live and interactive discussions. Joining us today are Ifat. Ifat is the Senior Communications Assistant with the UNHCR Bangladesh. Yusuf Zine, he is the Director of the documentary I Am Rohingya. And Javet Ilom, the Chief Strategic Officer with the Canadian Rohingya Development Initiative. Before we start, we just wanted to share a few important details with you. We will be streaming a video of our virtual visit on the main screen in Zoom. If for any reason you have any issues with viewing the video, we will also share a YouTube link in the chat line. Please be sure to stay online with us after the virtual visit for our discussion. There will be an opportunity for Q&A. We invite you to enter your questions for our guests, and we will do our best to answer as many as possible. We kindly request that you keep your questions brief, respectful of our guests, and focus on the Rohingya crisis. The chat and microphone functions will be disabled for today's event, but we encourage you to continue the conversations online by tagging UNHCR Canada on your social channels using the hashtag UNHCR on Mission. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Raphael to please go ahead and start the video, and we'll see you all back here after the virtual visit. Thank you again.
Hi, my name is Ifat. I work with UNHCR in Bangladesh, a country that hosts hundreds and thousands of Rohingya refugees who fled violence and discrimination in Myanmar. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the Rohingya situation.
The staggering scale of the Rohingya crisis is difficult to capture. With aerial photography, I've been able to show the immense scale of the Kuta Palang refugee camp. The area is now severely overcrowded and growing more so every day. It's a maze of tents and makeshift shelters where you can easily get lost. On several days, I've witnessed scenes when thousands of refugees fled across the border from Myanmar to Bangladesh. From above, you can see masses of people lined up along the narrow muddy paths in the rice fields. However, the aerial view doesn't fully convey the desperation. After photographing from above, I've tried to get down at eye level so that the world outside can appreciate the situation. I photographed women calmly swimming with their children, and others barely making it to safety. Some are suffering with injuries, pregnancies, and infections. Countless numbers of these people have told me over and over about trekking in the forest for 10, 15, 20 days to reach safety at the border. I've also witnessed this same drama at night. In the darkness, up to 30 boats will suddenly appear like ghosts on the shores of Bangladesh. Desperate refugees with only a few possessions will jump into the water seeking safety. You can see the look in their eyes. Many are totally traumatized. People have asked me what has impacted me the most. Many Rohingya don't know how to swim, which has led to countless drownings. Seeing dead children impacts everyone, no matter how many wars they've witnessed. And this for sure stands out in my memories.
A typical example of a shelter which has been built by the Rohingya themselves from a UNHCR funded distribution of a shelter kit. Now, a shelter kit consists of three main things: the bamboo, two different types of bamboo, structural bamboo, and also thinner bamboo for the roofing, rope, two types of rope, one strong rope and one smaller rope to bind it all together, and of course plastic sheeting. We're working with the communities and with their structures to make sure people have a disaster response plan. So when it does rain and when they see that the conditions are worsening, they have a plan. They know what to do. They know to come to a safe haven. This is as good as we can get at the moment. We are dealing with a caseload of 150,000+ shelters to get ready. In the last 6 weeks, UNHCR and its partners have got 30,000 ready. Still, we have a tremendous amount of work to do.
Hi, I'm Muhammad Ansar. I'm Bangladesh Taki. Arkansas, I go refugee. ini begun dasa mani ki Rohingya digo jokal taki di area. Ele dasa mani ki hodu undase kemakol. So onara hottor kem ede hodun manush begin saibari ba aga gura. সেই হিসাবে 11 মাসে মানুষ বেশা বেশি তকলে ঘুরে দেশে রাশন তো পুরো এরে লইলে এরে দাস মানে কিন্তু মানে কি জীবন পালন করে দে এনে দাস মানে কি বাসা ডিস্ট্রিবিউশন পয়েন্ট তো এই যেদুন নাকি রিফিউজি অকল আছে হিম বেগুন দাস মানে কি ইয়ান তো বাস তারফাল দাস মানে কি নকল ডিস্ট্রিবিউশন করে তো দাস মানে শুধু মানুষ সকল দাস মানে কি দারগত আছে সুরে বলা বলিও দাস লাইন দিজি I have UNHCR information for the maze. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah.
আচ্ছা আই করিতে আই রেফার করিতে যখন মানুষ যদি আর হাসা ইয়ে কোনো অসুবিধার লাই ইয়ে তাহলে আমরা এবারে পথ দেখাই দিই
Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. So ইয়ানো ইদে আর ভাষা তে বাদে আর বেগুন দাস আর ভাষার মধ্যে তে এসি ওনারা সো আর ভাষা গান আর ঘরের ভিতরে লয়ে যায় আইও ওনারা আর ভিতরে শোয় এই বলতে আর ফুয়া এতে এখন 15 মাসি পাটাই বাদে আর জীবানি কি বাই ফটো হল এই টাইম মাঝে হিতে দাসে মানে হমাসি এঙ্গুলে 9 মাস 11 মাসি 11 মাসি হই বা দাসে মানে কি একুলে 2 দিন পারে বাদে তাতো দাসে করে বিজার মাঝে নমুনিয়া হই দাসে মানে মারা গিয়ে গই তো এইটা দাসে মানে কি হসপিটাল দিলাম হসপিটাল দুইটা দাসে মানে কি আলহামদুলিল্লাহ আল্লাহ দাসে মানে কি তেরে বাঁচাইয়ে এখন দাসে মানে কি আর দাসে আর আমার সাথে দাসে দসারা এই জায়গায় ইয়ান মাঝে আর কোন জায়গায় রিস ইয়ান এই আর ওল্লা তো আইও আর ওল্লা মাঝে কি কি আছে ওই বলতে সোলার ইনলি দেশি আর ইয়ান মাঝে রান্না বাড়া করি ওরে ইয়ান মাঝে হাই দি This is my grandmother. She is 95 years old. ভাইয়া তুই কি আল্লাহ বাংলাদেশ আসো দে
দায়াচন্দ্র গরপুরাদের নদের গুড়া ফান্ডের ফান্নার দিলে ফান্না বেতনদের এনে বেশি দূরম মানিক গড়াই ফুরাদি বেদের গড়াই রে ফুরাদি বেদের অবাদি গুড়া ফান্ড খাই ইংরেজি কুমারি সিজি বেদের ওর মিকা মারামারি ঘুরা ফোন ইচ্ছা পাল্লা পরে
তাই ইয়ানি দাদা মানে কেমন রাস্তা তাই আইতে 20 মিনিট যাতে 20 মিনিট হিন্দলা লাগি দিয়া চেতো আধা কেজি মার দাও দাদা মানে কি ব্যাগ যাইতে মনে হয় যেদুন নিকি দাদা আর মদত করে এনজিও খোলা এনজিও খোল তাই বাদি হিনরি বেচা বেশি দাদা মানে কি আর তো রোহিঙ্গা কমিউনিটি তো বেচা বেশি শুকরিয়া এখন বাজার যাইতে কিছু আছে মানে তার হারি মাছ টাছ কিনি বললা বলি রে ওনারা পুরা সমগ্র আছে মানে কি কুতুলান কেমন মাঝে আর লেরে আছে মানে কি হারাই দিয়ে আনলা বলি রে ওনারা বেশা বেশি শুকরিয়া
Today, the refugees, they are not only updating their individual information, but we are also reorganizing the family composition and collecting any protection concern that is required. The staff members, they are collecting their biometrics, 10 fingerprints and 2 iris and 1 individual picture, which help us to secure their identity. This registration exercise has a major impact in refugee lives. With the information that we are collecting here on the registration site, the government of Bangladesh and the humanitarian agents will be able to better plan and target the refugees. It says on the card that their country of origin is Myanmar, which established their right to return home. I can see how happy the families are when they receive their new identity card.
I think that anxiety and worry is the most appropriate word to describe my emotion when this crisis started. The population density in the Cox's Bazar is more than double that of New York. There is an urgent need to deliver correct information on COVID to refugees so that they can protect themselves properly. The refugee volunteers conduct the household visit. So if they found any symptom among the refugees, they are trained to refer to the health clinic. UNHCR is constructing the health facility that includes a severe acute respiratory infection isolation and treatment center, or the quarantine centers, and then also intensive care unit. When the monsoon hits, it may bring the dangerous waterborne diseases, and which will stretch already limited health capacity in Cox's Bazar. So, combination of these challenges plus COVID-19 makes the vulnerable people more vulnerable.
এই যে মনে ক্যাম্পো জীবনের মধ্যে বই আড়াইলে তাফালান হসর মসর করে মনে করেন বর্মা দেখলি বা হসর মসর নদীত্ব এটা এলে মধ্যে তাফালা কাদা দুপুর দাফরগুলির মধ্যে নিজের গুম নয় বলতে নিজের তো গুম হয়ে ডর লাগে দেখি মনে করে তাফালা উড়ালে দেখবো বলা বৃষ্টি করবো বলা নিজের বাইও হস্ত পাইবো বলার আর নাম হচ্ছে হালিম আর বয়স 20 বছর আমি বেরোতে সেফটি ভলান্টিয়ার পারে ইনর বাক্যে আর ইয়ান লাভলি বেশি অশান্তি ইয়ান লাভলি বেশি বই মান ডরত আছি ডরতারিও যিন নাকি কমিউনিটি ভলান্টিয়ার আছে যিন নাকি ভলান্টিয়ার করলে কমিউনিটি ভলান্টিয়ার করলে কি হয় তো আসলে নিজের ঘর তো সেবা থাকতে পারে অনেকরকম ঘর মা হামিল মারতে পারে অনেক ঘর মার টিভিলে ডেলিভারি হতে পারে যদি বইয়ার আইতে ঘর কান্দে ভাঙতে পারে দিলে হ্যাঁ ঘর মাঝে কি ডেলিভারি থাকবো নাকি ঘর ভাঙিয়ে হইতে পারে বলি নসাই নিজেও রেনকোট ড্রাই ফ্রুট সরি রেনকোট আর গামবুট পিনিয়ে হেলমেট দিয়ে আর ইয়া তো বা সাতালয় দশ নিয়ে বাইরিয়া কমিউনিটির হালত পড়ায় হার ঘর মা কি যুদ্ধ আছে সেফ হেভেনের হাতা বলি আগে নিজের ঘরের হতা নিজের ক্যাম্পের হতা বলে দিয়া যদি গছ যদি রেস হতে দিলি তার পতানো গোয়া বৃষ্টি সারা গো যাই যাই দত্ত মাঝে ঘরে ঘরে যাই এরকম যাই দেখি তোমার ঘর গান রেস ঠান্ডাত তোমার ঘর গান আর কি করি লো যাবে চাই অন্য কাম মাঝে ভলান্টিয়ারশিপ হাজ করি ভলান্টিয়ার টিম লিডারশিপ হাজ করি মানে আর রোহিঙ্গা কমিউনিটি নিয়ে কি হালতে থাকলে ভালো হবো মানে কি করলে ভালো হবো কি নগরলে ভালো হইব
Thank you for joining UNHCR on Mission Rohingya, where we got to learn about Rohingya refugee crisis and the refugees living in Bangladesh. I look forward to seeing you in the panel Q&A starting now.
Welcome back, everybody. So for those who may have joined us a few minutes late, I'm Alex Tom with the UN Refugee Agency. Welcome again to our session today. And thank you for joining us for the UNHCR on mission focused on the Rohingya crisis. I'm so pleased to be joined by a wonderful panel today. You've seen her in the video. Her name is Ifat. She is the Senior Communications Assistant with the UNHCR Bangladesh. We have Youssef Zine. He is the director of the documentary I Am Rohingya. And Javit Elam. He's the Chief Strategic Officer with the Canadian Rohingya Development Initiative. So before we speak with our panelists, we want to hear from you. We want to ensure that the UNHCR on mission is an interactive experience. So throughout the sessions, we will be asking you a few questions. So to participate, simply click the answer when the poll comes up on your screen. I believe the first poll is coming up. So if you could see it, there you go. We have our first interactive question. So the question is, after viewing the video, how did it make you feel? Was the video impactful? So the options are sad, inspired, motivated to give, surprised, I learned something new, I want to learn more, devastated, or all of the above. So please make your option or choose the option. So thank you again. I want to thank everyone who submitted questions so far for our event prior to today's event via the Survey Monkey. If you have any questions for our guests, please enter it into the Q&A section of the chat, and we will try to answer as many as we can. You can also find the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. If we can't answer all the questions, we'll take down all the unanswered questions and try to respond to them on our UNHCR on Mission webpage on unhcr.ca. Again, please keep your questions brief, respectful of our guests, and focus on the Rohingya crisis. So Ifat, Youssef, Javit, it's great to have you here. Thank you. Thank you again for joining us today. Before we start our discussion, I want to acknowledge the extraordinary generosity of Canadians who have donated to support UNHCR during the Rohingya crisis. UNHCR Canada has raised more than $2.5 million for Rohingya refugees from donors like the folks that have joined us today. No gift is too small, and every single dollar has made a difference. So thank you. Ifat, I'd like to start the discussion with you. Hello again. You are in Bangladesh. Can you tell us about how donations have been able to make a difference in the lives of Rohingya refugees in the country?
Hi. So, first of all, thanks to everyone who's watching us today. I'm extremely grateful to you for spending this time out of your busy life to listen to us and to know more about Rohingya refugees living in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, as well as UNHCR's work here. So as we entered fourth year of this crisis, my heartiest thanks to all who's been supporting us since 2017. And I have been with UNHCR in Bangladesh since the very early stage of this influx. So right now, more than 800,000 Rohingya refugees are living in 34 camps in Cox's Bazar. They came here in 2017 with nothing, just a pair of clothes that they were wearing and some hope for survival. And right after they arrived in support to the government of Bangladesh, we immediately started providing emergency life saving support by giving them medical support, food deliveries required for surviving in a crisis situation like that. And we gradually set up the camps. Nothing was possible without the support from the people and the government of Bangladesh, as well as the generous donors like Canada. The lives of Rohingya depends on the aid and the support we receive from our donors and international supporters. As there's no livelihood opportunity available for them here, and it is not possible for them to go out, find work, and earn cash money. So they rely on the funding that we receive. So for almost everything, including food, water, medication, etc., they solely rely on us and our dear supporters. So this has even become even greater in time of the global pandemic of COVID-19. We needed to not only support lives of the Rohingya refugees, but we also needed to provide emergency health support to the refugees when the COVID-19 spread in the camps. We, UNHCR, set up the first COVID infection treatment and isolation center in Ukia. And Ukia is the area where the mega camp is located. So we were there to support the refugees as well as the local community living around the camps. And as of now, more than 3,000 patients were attended in the centers for COVID, both refugees and locals. We are also constantly trying to build uh, greener camps by planting more and more trees and restoring the forest that you might know the camps were built in the mountainous forest land which was affected while providing shelters to the refugees. So restoring environment is a great focus area for us. While we still need to do a lion's share of work, some results can be seen when we see pictures on now and then of the sites. And the area of the country is very much the area where the camps are in Cox's Bazar. It's in Ukia and Teknaf. So these places are very much prone to cyclone and natural disaster. In my last 4 years life in Cox's Bazar, I have seen how badly it can affect lives of people in this region every year. With floods, landslides, etc., people die every day. Particularly Rohingya refugees living in the camps are extremely vulnerable to the monsoon. Our volunteers receive trainings, work throughout the year to monitor, prepare, and disseminate awareness messages to the community. And they are the volunteers, the refugee and host community volunteers that we have are the backbone of our response. The government of Bangladesh and the people are very kind to like open their heart to the refugees, but it itself is a small country with vast population, majority of whom are still struggling every day because of poverty. So the fund we receive from the generous donors and people in countries like Canada is the lifeline for the hundreds and thousands of the Rohingya refugees living here. So I believe it is extremely important that we acknowledge the fact that it's not only making difference in the lives of the refugees, but also helping them to live their day-to-day life, to survive. So I would like to take the opportunity to thank all our supporters, donors for coming forward, opening their heart to the refugees in need. Thanks.
Thank you, Ifat. Thank you for that, for all the work that your colleagues and yourself do there, and the insight, especially the update on Ukia and Teknaf. That's fantastic. Thank you. We have a number of questions coming in, so I'm gonna keep going so that we could answer more. I'm sure I'll come back to you again, Ifat. So this next question is for Youssef. Your film I Am Rohingya is a documentary inspired by the award-winning play of the same name. It's about the journey of 14 young Rohingya refugees now living in Canada. Youssef, how did the idea for display and the subsequent documentary come about?
Well, first of all, thank you, Alex and UNHCR for including me in this discussion. So, for those who don't know or haven't seen our film, like Alex said, it's about 14 Rohingya refugees living here in Canada in the amazing community that exists in Waterloo, Ontario. And it documents their journey to reenact their stories, their parents' stories, their grandparents' stories in a live theater production called I Am Rohingya, where they themselves become actors and reenact stories of what it was like for them and their families to flee Myanmar, what it was like to live in some of the conditions that you just saw in that video in refugee camps, and what it was like to resettle in Canada. I met the community. I was working for an organization, and we were tasked with doing a project specifically with the youth, the Rohingya youth. And the ages ranged from 8 years old to 22 years old and everything in between. And so when I approached them to ask what they wanted to do with this funding that we had, it was unanimous that they all wanted to tell their story. They all felt like nobody was paying attention. Nobody cared about the Rohingya crisis. This is 2016, 2015, 2016. And, they would spend months and years going to city centers across Ontario protesting and trying to spread awareness, and nobody was really paying attention. And they just felt frustrated that they had to sit by the sidelines and watch their people be erased. And so, my background is in theater and performance. And so when one of the youth suggested doing a play, I thought that would be incredibly powerful because, it's true at the time, the Rohingya crisis wasn't getting a lot of news coverage. And as we know, when other issues come up in the world, there's a flux of coverage for the Rohingya crisis. But I thought the idea of, approaching the way we look at crises like this and putting it in the form of a theater production and bringing it to audiences right in front of them. And the fact that these kids who are not actors, who are just have been through very harrowing and difficult experiences. I mean, all of them except for the youngest were born and raised in Cox's Bazar and grew up in refugee camps. And many of them have still family and friends who are still there, who are still in Myanmar, who are still in the camps. And so how powerful could it be to see them bring these memories to life in front of a live audience? And so we created this 4-act play called I Am Rohingya that kind of chronicles the journey and the history of the Rohingya people up until now. I knew that, with a play, it's very limited in scope. We can only take it so far. And so that inspired us to want to document the process on film. So we documented the rehearsal process. We did interviews with the families. You similar to the video you just watched, you hear testimonies of Rohingya people in different generations, and we see intergenerational violence and suffering and how it's different for the kids, for the parents, for the grandparents, and so on, but through performance, through real performances. And so that for me was a real challenge and inspiring thing to be able to engage with real testimonies of this crisis through art, through performance, and see a different way that we can engage with this issue.
Thank you, Youssef. Thank you, Youssef. Yes, I was lucky enough to have met some of those Rohingya youths. I believe in one of those live plays, or at least not live plays, but the live viewing of one of the movie that you had. So really inspirational. I know that the staff and at least the colleagues that I have here in Toronto use the stories that we've gathered from them when we met them. So absolutely inspirational, and thank you for helping them get that out there. So thank you for that. My next question actually is now for Javet. Javet, how did your experience as a refugee shape your decision to be a part of the Canadian Rohingya Development Initiative?
Thanks, you, Alice, and thanks everyone behind the scene working so hard to make this happen in the UNHCR Canada and around the world. And thank you for those of you who are taking your busy afternoon Monday to tune in and listen to the Rohingya issues of every crazy things going on around the world. For me, when I first arrived, like back in a few years ago in Canada, on a random night, I end up with very little to nothing to my names. You know, despite Canada being this, having this such a generous community and have amazing cultures of welcoming newcomers, at the end it was the Rohingya diaspora that in the Waterloo, where Yusuf just mentioned, that I found refuge myself finally. And so that was the very beginning as a refugee's like journey to Canada. But as slowly I got to stand on my feet, and it was this realizations of this sort of moral obligations or like a responsibility almost to provide the voice, like too many silence during the refugees back at home, back in Bangladesh, back in around the world, or elsewhere, like once I was. So this was that the urge of like, you now have a responsibility to provide those who were in the same condition I once was. That was the very beginning. That was how I get into the Canadian Rohingya Development Initiative. But slowly it is more of this a lot of other realizations of why there need to be Rohingya organizations, even though similar works has been done and being still continued by many different organizations. There were these sudden cultural elements that were often get lost in the translations or often get filtered through a lot of bureaucratic process like that. We felt the need of providing the authentic voice or providing certain works that are really hard for any other non-Rohingya organizations to perform or to do. So we thought we need to chip in, and like that's when I became a part of the Rohingya Development Initiative.
Great, David. Thank you for that. And yes, we'd love to continue to work with you guys to do exactly what you just said. Inspire and ensure that we capture those messaging and stories that the Rohingyans get, especially for us as a UNHCR, where we are helping a number of diaspora right now, and it's great that you guys, or at least the organization that you're working with right now, is just nearby, and that we could partner and work with you just like we do with Youssef. So thank you for that. We have a question from SurveyMonkey, and we would like to ask Ifat actually on this. What has it been like being in Bangladesh, both for UNHCR staff and Rohingya refugees during the monsoon season? Did the donor dollars help prepare and reinforce the shelters that Rohingya families live in?
So thank you so much for this question. This question is particularly important right now because we are in that situation right now. We are in the monsoon situation. Even as I talk to you, it's raining outside. So it's even raining in the camps. So yeah, we are at that moment when we need more and more support because we need to deliver more. So yeah, monsoon is one of our major response area. As you might know, we have 34 congested Rohingya refugee camps in Cox's Bazar, and Cox's Bazar is one of the most disaster-prone district in the country, which is subject to cyclone, monsoon, strong wind, flood, landslides, and other natural disasters. And these disasters can cause great casualties, disrupt humanitarian access, and severely damage shelters and other critical facilities. Even just recently, in late July this year, we have had a great flood and landslide situation in the camps. And for almost 46,000 refugees was affected, and over 6,000 shelters were damaged, while 21,000 refugees have been forced to temporarily relocate relocate because of their shelter damage, as they needed safe space. And beside the shelters, many facilities for health, education, community volunteers, or even mosques were completely washed away. Families lost almost everything that they had. Essential things like cooking stoves, gas cylinders, sleeping mats, their clothes, even some lost the documents that they require to receive their aids and assistance. Refugee volunteers, I would like to mention again, they played an extremely crucial role in, uh, along with our emergency response team. They help to save lives of the families affected by not only monitoring the situation, strengthening the emergency response, but also by rescuing people in most danger. For example, people with physical challenges, elderlies, and pregnant women, etc. We, UNHCR, along with the humanitarian response community in Cox's Bazar, initiated immediate repairs for latrines, bathing space, water points, tube wells, tap stands, solid waste, and fecal sludge management sites in that affected area. Because when the flood happened, it affected not only the shelter that where they sleep in and sleep in, but also the other facilities that is related to their lives, day-to-day lives in the camps. And all these works were not possible without the support we received from our donor partners. We could respond immediately. We could be on the ground immediately to meet the needs, to save them from the damage, or we could only start the repairing of the work right after the water got down, just because we had the funds, we had the support from there. As I have already mentioned, these funds are the lifelines for almost 900,000 Rohingya refugees living in Cox's Bazar. And with every amount, be it $5 or even 1,000, it adds to the survival of the lives of the Rohingya refugees. And it has even proven itself more and more significant during the monsoon period every year. So yeah, thanks to you, thanks to the donor for their kindness. And over to you, Alex.
Mhm. No, thank you, Ifat, for that, because I remember the campaigns and appeals that we had during and after that flood. The colleagues in Bangladesh were very responsive in letting us know, and in fact, because they were so responsive, we were able to then give follow-ups to our donors on what was happening there. And for most of them, they were able to provide more funding, which is fantastic. So thank you for that, and thank you to the colleagues there. The next poll actually is related to weather and the monsoon. So I believe Hannah is going to be putting up the next interactive poll. So the question is, what kind of weather would Rohingya refugees experience during the monsoon season in Bangladesh? So the options are mild wind accompanied by hail, long-lasting lightning storms and humid climate, lack of precipitation resulting in drought, strong winds accompanied by heavy torrential rains and a humid climate. So please make your choice. All right. So the answer for that particular poll is that monsoons are strong winds accompanied by heavy torrential rains and a humid climate, which is everybody. 99% of you answered that. So thank you for that. The next question, so we're going to continue with the questions. I want to go through as many as possible. The next question will be for Youssef. One of the things viewers love about your documentary and play is that refugees were able to tell their own story. What was the experience like for you as a filmmaker, and what insights did you gain from working with the Rohingya refugees that are here now in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, it taught me a lot about working with this community. Taught me a lot about being a filmmaker, being a storyteller, being a performer myself. But the biggest thing I learned is that we need to start including Rohingya people at the table when it comes to decisions. Oftentimes decisions are made without hearing from the community and hearing their perspectives. And I'm so glad UNHCR works with Rohingya refugees and works on the ground with the people. For me, as a director working on the film and on the play, it was hard for me not to interject with what I thought would have worked. I've been doing theater my whole life, and so there were times where I wanted to direct a scene a certain way or write a piece of dialogue a certain way, but it wasn't authentic, because at the end of the day, I'm not a Rohingya. I'm there as an ally. I'm there as a supporter, and there were a lot of times I had to just step back and let the youth take over and figure stuff out. And sometimes they would start speaking in Rohingya, and that really excluded me, but they were figuring it out, and it was more authentic at the end of the day. And so I learned that we need to be asking the community what they think needs to happen, and what because at the time nobody was asking the youth in the community what they thought the solutions were to the crisis or what they thought would help. They were just kind of going along with the elders in the community, because that's it's normal. But the one time the youth were given agency to do something, it had this incredible impact with the show, with the film. I mean, it's 3-4 years now since it's 5 years since we started the play. And here we are now, still talking about it, still screening around the world, still doing events like this. The kids themselves, they're no longer kids now. They're grown up. They're becoming advocates for their community, helping start organizations like CRDI, and becoming involved in this global humanitarian issue. And that comes from hearing them out, hearing what they have to say, hearing their stories, inviting them to the table, and being an ally and supporting them, not interjecting yourself and your perspective into what you think should solve this issue. I think they need to be there, and you need to be there to support them. And so that's why I love working with UNHCR and the people who are here. You are also part of that. You're also an ally, and you are a witness to this crisis, and it's our responsibility to be there with them.
No, absolutely, and you're absolutely right. Your video is still very much relevant. We show it, or at least make known of it to our donors and supporters, and it tells the story, right? You're absolutely right, where it amplifies and involves and it includes them. No matter what we say, it's so much better coming from the diaspora, and your video does exactly that. So thank you for that. This question is for JVET. So JVET, we're so grateful for the support of the Canadian Rohingya Development Initiative and the fact that you've started a fundraiser to help support Rohingya refugees. Can you tell us about the organization's goal and what their hopes are for fellow Rohingya refugees?
Right, thank you. Like I think Yusuf kind of like a preempt a few things that related to that questions. Like a lot of the time the agency was being removed like from the actual people like who were the subject of it. And then like in the Rohingya, like many other, I think, Rohingya organizations and or advocacy organizations in general, a lot of the time CRDA works steer around the ever evolving situations. And most of the time it is reactive to many political dynamics that's like always changing from today to yesterday, from the coup to from the governments and all the other court cases around the world. So it is always evolving, and always the political dynamic is reacted to it. But at the same time, those on the ground, organizations like UNHCR Canada and a few other Rohingya organizations that we know of, like who are in the camp, they have enough on their hands to spare, like, the scarce resources for anything else other than the very day-to-day survivals. So we thought, like, if everybody is looking after day-to-day event, the survival of a week, the Russians for a month, like nobody has the time or energy or the resources to focus on a little bit more longer term issues, on a more, say, 5 years instead of a week Russian sort of thing. So a lot of our goals I wouldn't say a goal. Like we say a lot of our goals is because we have a few, but we definitely don't have enough time or resources at this point. But a lot of our goals are like focused on the long-term institutional changes, whether it be through input into policy circles, like a decision-making circles, or even academia, and with the ultimate hope of like for a eventual repatriations in a dignified way with all the rights that have been stripped, restored, and we tend to pick up like long-term issues, other educations, for example. When the remote learning became a thing, we had like a few initiative educational wise. That's the name is initiative because we tend to pick up a lot of the things that are not necessarily being picked up by other organizations that has too much on their hands for the day-to-day survivals, which is of course a much more immediate need. Yeah, thank you. That's pretty much in a nutshell of the CRDR.
No, I think you guys are doing very well. So hopefully it continues, and then with the, I mean, there's so many partners out there as well. And as you mentioned, there's so many things that we could do short term and long term, and glad that your organization as well is moving to that direction of also trying to find solutions on the long term. So I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. We have a special question in from Nabila Noor. Nabila is a Bangladeshi American entrepreneur. Nabila asks, what would you say to those at home who want to help? How would you say they can amplify the cause? So thank you, Nabila, for the question. Maybe perhaps Ifat, if you could answer this particular question.
Thank you, Alex, and thanks to Nabila Noor for this excellent question. It really gives us perspective on, on our willingness to support, and it's thank you for asking this. And I myself personally love Nabila Noor. I follow her on her social media handle. She's doing great with the kind of messaging she does. On her channel, so it's great, and it's really inspiring to see that she is taking her time and is interested to know about our work, and she's watching us and even asking us this question. So to answer this, I would like to quote you, Alex. So at the very beginning, you said no gift is too small, and every single dollar has made a difference. So yeah, so I think if, everyone, including those who are at home, who are interested to contribute, can contribute by raising awareness, by talking about the situation of Rohingya refugees. Creating empathy or feeling the pain of those suffering is the first step to contribute. So when you can share as you learn about the response shall be a great support. You can do this with your social media handles, especially about Nabil. I know how empowered, loved, and welcomed she is by her followers on social media, me being one of them. So it is a great example on of how one can support through their social media handles by not only spreading the messages, but also they can participate and arrange for fundraising activities. And there are country offices there are UNHCR offices in many countries, so they can for sure reach out to them and help with the fundraising activities. I can also mention about the Rohingya diaspora we have around the world, and in particularly in your area, in the community around us. It is always helpful to connect with them, to see, understand the needs of the community, as well as to learn the cultures and history and more about them. So I think that's how someone who is willing, no matter if they're working at the office or they're at home, they can come forward and support. So thank you so much for the question. And yeah, thanks to Nabila Noor for her interest. Thank you. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Ifat. I have actually a follow-up question to Yusuf before I ask you those questions, Ifat. So I'm going to ask that question for Yusuf because we were talking about the film. There was the question is, are there any plans for a follow-up on the documentary, Yusuf?
We probably get that question more than any question, because, and it's a testament to the fact that people want to see more of it, want to, people who didn't actually get to see the play live. And I think we kind of knew that from the get-go, that the play itself would have a shelf life, as most theater does, because you can only tour it for so long. And for a lot of the kids involved in the play, a lot of them aren't citizens or don't have a passport. So we got offers to travel to places like the UK to perform it, but not everyone could go. And we made a pact that we weren't going to do this play unless everybody, the whole cast who was there from the beginning, was going to be there. But we have, that's why we wanted to make the film. And in the film, if you watch it, we did film segments of the play, sort of more cinematically, but in a theater space. And we intersperse those scenes throughout the film. So even as you're watching the documentary, by the end, you actually will have seen most of the play, I Am Rohingya, just in a different format. Obviously, it's not the same as seeing it live. But again, that's why we wanted to make the film, because the film can go on forever to be screened. I mean, we're able to screen it across the world. We're screening it in Korea next month. And it just, that's the biggest joy, is to be able to take this to audiences across the world that are not as exposed to this crisis, and share those stories. So we're going to be continuing to promote the film and screen it, and as long as I'm breathing, I'm always happy to screen the film and talk about it and promote it.
And we're happy to partner with you to get that out of there, get it out to our audience anyway. So thank you, Yusuf. I have another question. I think the question is for, perhaps this is for Javed. Javed, in the live chat, the question was, I had never heard of the Rohingya until last year. Why hadn't I heard about these people before? I guess, and maybe the question is, why are Rohingya seldom talked about?
Yeah, it is quite of an issue that often comes up, or we often talk about how the Rohingya issue became often almost like a trend. Whenever a tragedy happens that is bad enough to make it to the news, it's kind of like a spread across, and most of the time it's just nowhere to be found. And one of the underlying reasons that operations and the whole long genocide in Burma was not conducted in a violence, or to the extent where it happened in 2017. It was going on for the last 4 or 5 decades, but most of the time it was this slow burning genocide. There's nothing too dramatic, nothing too explosive. There were no bombs, so it didn't make it to the news. But whenever there's a tragedy that's big enough to make it to the breaking news, that's when people tend to hear it. So that was the underlying reason why it's been so silenced. Actually, I believe it is more lethal. A slow burning genocide is more lethal than explosive, any explosive events that is a one-time occurrence.
Well, thank you for your thoughts, Javed. I'm gonna go back to what Ifat was talking about, because there is I wanted to also give an update from our side, and perhaps Ifat could also provide an update from her side on this. So earlier this year, there was a deadly fire. There was a deadly fire that tore through the Katupulong refugee camp, which affected many Rohingya families. The update from us is that with thanks to our generous donors, who some are in this call, more than $100,000 was raised within 24 hours after that fire. I guess perhaps if you could give us an update on the recovery and the rebuilding efforts on that particular situation, and how the donations from our donors have helped.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question. Yeah, you said it right. It was a huge fire situation. At that time, 3 camps were tremendously affected, impacting more than 48,000 refugees, and everything was burned to ashes. Beside the shelters, distribution points, hospitals, learning centers, latrines, etc., were all burned to ashes. But our camp authorities, our emergency response team, but most importantly, our volunteers, our refugee volunteers were there on the ground to respond as respond first of everyone. So if I remember the day when the fire happened, I mean, it was a regular afternoon in the office, and we were having a regular work, and suddenly I got a call in middle of a meeting, and it was a volunteer. I picked it up and I heard the scream, fire, fire, there's fire. So I couldn't hear him much, so I cut the call. I was struck for a moment, and I went to my field colleague, because they are always on the ground working every day. We have our field and site management unit working in those particular areas. So I verified with our colleagues, and we got to know how tremendous the fire incident was. So our emergency response team went into the site, into the site affected. Our volunteers were there. They were rescuing people, and we saw how people were getting affected by the fire. Some people, some lost their family members. We When we went to the camp, we saw the children crying for their lost mother, the mothers crying for their lost children, wives crying for their lost husbands, husbands crying for their lost families. So this kind of situations, even some wanted to risk their life to go back to their shelter to get the documents that is really essential for availing the services and assistance in the camps. So our volunteers were there, our emergency response team were there, and the camp authorities, they were also there. So it was a holistic support approach from the humanitarian community we have in Cox's Bazar, in support to the government, to do the emergency response in that particular area. And the environment was mostly affected, because I remember after walking for like 2 hours in that camp, I started feeling burn in my skin, and I started having breathing issues. And when I asked other colleagues and our volunteers, they said the same, because all the trees, gardens, all the greens that we had around were all burned. And from those burn, it was the air was becoming toxic. So from there on, we started rebuilding, repairing. Overnight, we made sure that the shelters are provided to the people, so that they have roof under over their head to spend their nights and days by the time we repair their shelters. So it was all given. We provided the families with kitchen kits, safe water, food, latrines, because everything was burned down. And we started our work to basically rebuild new life for the refugees, because they depend on the aids that they receive. So the volunteers also help to relink the families. So within a week or so, all the families were united, and it was only possible because of the 24/7 work of the volunteers. So these were all made possible because of the kindness and solidarity shown by the government of Bangladesh. And also it wasn't possible without the support and kind and full heartedness of the donor partners like Canada. The deliveries of emergency support was only possible because of the kindness you shown. As I keep saying, the funds you provide are the lifelines for the Rohingya refugees, and it has again helped them crucially during the time when they lost the little possessions that they had again, once again in their life. So thanks to all, thank you so much. And from the camp, I have recently been in that side. Life is now bit in that particular camps are becoming very regular. The volunteers are still there, always monitoring the situation. Our colleagues are there, keeping up, and we lost the facilities that were lost were also rebuilt. So this all are possible because of our supporters. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mhm,
Over to you,
mhm.
Alex.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so unfortunately, we're nearly out of time today. So, but this has been a wonderful discussion, and I'm sure the team here is going to have another follow-up at some point. So, but I wanted to thank Ifat, Youssef, and Javed for joining us today. A special thanks to Ifat and the team there at UNHCR in Bangladesh for bringing us on the virtual mission. And a very special thanks to all of you for making time to join us today for UNHCR on Mission Rohingya. I'd like to concede the rest of my time to a special guest. It's the UNHCR representative to Bangladesh, Mr. Johannes van der Klauw. Johannes, thank you for being with us today. Please go ahead, over to you.
Thank you, Alex. And I think it's good morning in Canada to all of you. First of all, I feel honored and humbled to be part of this discussion and to deliver a few concluding remarks because Bangladesh and Rohingya situation is one of the many humanitarian crises in the world today. So I'm very happy that we put in focus the many challenges we have around this operation. I've served in many UNHCR operations in the world. First of all, I was also a short while representative in Canada. I know your team very well. So I'm very happy to reconnect, and I'm sure some of my former colleagues also in Ottawa amongst the participants. I also used to serve in Yemen, and I participated in your mission to Yemen with my successor there, Jean-Nicolas Beuze, who was also my successor in Canada. The world is very, very small. So I have a number of personal links to your program, your work. So for that reason also, I'm very happy to be here. But if you would ask me, by way of conclusion, what is so special for a UNHCR worker amongst the Rohingya situation, I would say three things. One is the scale, the staggering scale of the 34 camps clustered together. It's the single largest concentration of refugees in the world. It was also in the very pertinent movie we started this. It is massive. And so since it's so massive, that we were able to, as a humanitarian community with the authorities and, as was multiple times said, the refugees themselves in the center, that we were able to set up the services, the administration, the running of these camps was not an easy thing to do. So the scale of the operation is something that stands out, and therefore also the scale of disasters. Ifat talked about the fire. There are irregular fires, but the scale and the rapidity with which it spread on the 21st of March, it's still in me all the today. So that's one thing, which gives all the challenges. The second is, again, this was also very much in the movie and in the testimonies, the extreme trauma the Rohingyas have suffered prior to coming to Bangladesh. I don't have the time to go into this again, but the current Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has said this is the most discriminated people in the world. They're not only refugees, they're also stateless. Their country of origin, Myanmar, doesn't want them, has disenfranchised them, doesn't give them citizenship. And then you've heard when they fled, the massive scale of violence, evasion of a whole ethnicity, it's terrible. And we should keep that in mind, because that's my third point. I'm then very much impressed by the Rohingya about what we call their resilience, that they still, notwithstanding that they have suffered and all their vulnerabilities, are still so hopeful upon a future return and still so committed to have some dignified life in the camp and find themselves some purpose, because it's not easy, you know. It's now 4 years last week since the largest single influx came in 2017, and there's still no clear prospect of a return. So to keep the hopes, to keep each other also motivated is something which is striking. And I know I have no time, but just to give you a few examples from my personal encounters with the refugees. And I echo what Youssef was saying. They, as refugees, they're also very strong because they take their lives in their own hand. They do fantastic initiatives. They support each other. We talked a lot about the volunteers. There are tens of thousands. They're community health workers. They are the monsoon rescue workers. They're also the social workers. They are the teachers in the learning centers. but also don't forget they look after the waste management. They look after the whole planning of the camps. It's fantastic. They are the backbone of service delivery, particularly in COVID times where we as humanitarian workers had to reduce our footprint. One word about COVID. There was a question in the chat. The refugees now also being vaccinated, which is great. This month we finally started. The first 40,000 have been vaccinated, and the rate of infection has been relatively low. We only have now 2,300 refugees, about all these 880,000 which were positive, and we've 30 deaths, unfortunately, but not more than 30. So it shows how much the community has been looking after each other to try to do everything to prevent the spread of the virus. The children as we said, half of the population is minor. The children, how they also work for other children, how they do actions to combat child labor and early marriages. It's impressive if you talk with them. The young adult men who are role models to prevent and respond to sexual violence in the camp, which is a real issue. How the refugees try with the host community to keep good neighborly relations, because that's a big, big challenge. What we call the social cohesion, the role they play, the role they as refugees link up with the police, the imam, the female imams, what they do for the women, and how they keep the relations with the host community, women and others. That's all impressive. Youssef is a filmmaker. He knows the Rohingya refugees. They have a film academy now in the camps, Omar's Film School. They, of course, do documentaries and they do work, awareness work for COVID support, prevention, but they also work about their heritage, their cultural heritage, their oral traditions. I mean, to keep their culture. There are multiple examples of how the Rohingya refugees try to shape their life while waiting for return to Myanmar. A last word about funding. It's so important that we stay committed to fund the Rohingya operation, because first of all, it's sad, sorry to say, we have to compete with new emergencies, Haiti, Ethiopia, and now Afghanistan. So the well-funded and well-coordinated Rohingya operation of the last years is not a given for the future. So we need to keep the funds flowing. But secondly, we are going out of a humanitarian emergency into what we call a protected situation. We are now in the 4th year of this large influx, and donors start to become fatigued because they have to have the funding, the humanitarian funding, ready for these new emergencies, as we just discussed and witness these days, Afghanistan, Haiti, Ethiopia. It's therefore very important that we keep our funding base, and every single dollar counts. And because you have these very inspiring, innovative, not so costly, but small-scale projects in the social sphere, in the environmental sphere, in the cultural sphere, in the protection sphere, it's so well spent, any private money in particular, for our operation. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you, Johannes. Thank you so much for that, and thank you for taking time to speak to us today. I'm already getting some requests for a future event with yourself and our representative here. Perhaps we could discuss this at a further detail. I know that there's a number of donors that we have that would certainly would love to hear that. So thank you again, Johannes, and thank you for the update and the insights so far. We will sure to get a hold of you and your team, and then and perhaps plan that for the future. So I think we're a little bit over time right now, but that's okay. It's a fantastic discussion, and we're seeing a lot of engagement through the Zoom call. So this is really good. Thank you. Our support of refugee and displaced families wouldn't be possible without you, and we will be sending you more information in the coming days. So please check your email. While our event is drawing to a close, we invite you to continue the conversations online by tagging UNHCR Canada on your social media posts using the hashtag UNHCR on mission. I wish you and your loved ones continued safety and good health during this time. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Until then, see you next time. And thank you, everybody, again. Thank you to the guests and thank you to the panelists. Thank you. Have a great day.